You are listening to That Big CEO Energy, where we talk all things business, life, marriage, and push you to a new edge of discovering what that big CEO energy means for you. Listen, I understand that we have barriers that we carry from when we were once employees, and those have impacted us as we continue to build our businesses. I'm here to walk alongside you and give you encouragement through interviews with friends and other women in business who have broken down those barriers and paved their own way. Tune in with me as we uncover some of the unconscious things that we do that keep us from building that big CEO energy we've always dreamed about. Let's dive in. Welcome back to this very special episode. My daughter turned 17 yesterday, and many of you might not think that that is a milestone, but y'all, I have kept this human being alive for 17 years. Wow. Even just saying that audibly, just what a time. What a time to be alive. For those of you that follow me along or have showed up in Clubhouse with me or any type of space where I talk about being a mom, you would know that I was a single mom for a really long time. And I'm going to kind of walk you through sort of what I've learned being a mom for 17 years. It has been the most wild ride of my life, the best ride of my life, and the hardest ride of my life. And originally, I was going to have my daughter on here, and maybe at some point we'll do that. But I really wanted to come back to just kind of some foundational things. And for those of you that don't know my journey of being a single mom, buckle up. I don't even know where to start, but I guess I'm going to start kind of from the beginning. I was 19 years old when I became pregnant with my daughter, and I was not, nor have I ever been, married to her father. And I was only dating her dad for about, I don't know, maybe 4 months before I came up pregnant, and not the ideal situation. My goal after high school was I was going to go to college. I was going to move to DC, become a lobbyist in DC, and then I was going to take a year off and go to Europe and travel the world. None of that happened. But what happened instead was I learned a lot. And when I became pregnant, I was not in a position where I could financially take care of a child. I had just dropped out of college because I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was not running around with the best crowd of people. And so life was just not what I thought it was going to be, nor was I executing anything of which that would promote my life in the way in which I wanted it to go. So here I am, pregnant with this baby, and I was 20 when I had her. As one would suspect as a single mom, I was on welfare for quite so many years. And when she was about 4, I had just left a very toxic marriage and moved back home. And I decided that I was going to finish school no matter what. And so previously, when I was married, I decided that I was going to go back to school, and I did the best that I could in that situation. Eventually had to drop out just because it was a very abusive and toxic situation. And when I came home, something happened. I was living with a roommate, then I was living with my aunt and uncle, and I decided that come hell or high water, I was going to go to school. So That was me taking 16 credit hours, working 3 jobs, and obviously I'm still on welfare at this point. And I had gotten to a point where I was graduating school and I was setting myself up to get a corporate job, a big girl job. You know, that's everything that everybody dreams of. You know, you go and you work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and you have your weekends off. And so for stability purposes, I had to do that. I had no other choice because I knew that I had this child that was completely dependent upon me. What I didn't want was to be a product of the system. And so I had worked my little ass off the whole entire time to make it happen. And so I remember when I had gotten a letter in the mail, and the letter in the mail, you know, I was used to getting letters in the mail from the state because you had to renew your benefits, you had to show proof of income and all of this stuff and things. And when I received the letter in the mail, I thought, oh, this is just another renewal. I just have to, you know, submit my stuff. Mind you, this is like pre-internet electronic things, not necessarily pre-internet, but, you know, it wasn't efficient like it is today. You still had to go to the office. And so I remember opening this letter, and I was about 2 weeks from starting my corporate job, which would have meant, because I was being paid biweekly, I had a month that was sort of gapped that I knew I had to ride my benefits out. And I read the letter, and the letter said that my benefits were being denied because I had made too much. And let me just backtrack a little bit. When the state has poverty levels that are set, in my humble opinion, they are not realistic. I do believe that that is a piece of legislation that does need to be overhauled. And it is quite different in real life than it is on black and white on what poverty levels are. Now, mind you, I am taking out loans for school. I am working 3 jobs. I'm going to school 21 credit hours. And I received this letter that says, hey, you make too much money now. Sorry, your benefits are being cut. And my heart sank. And I thought, I have four weeks until I've made it, you know, and I'm using air quotes here, until I've made it. I'm going to call and I'm just going to see. The worst that they're ever going to tell me is no. So I call, and my caseworker, I can't remember her name, and I really wish I could, because I would call her and have lunch with her and thank her and hug her. But I called her and I was just in tears, and I said, ma'am, I have 4 weeks until I don't need any of this anymore. Nothing. I had bargained to get my benefits on day 1 of my position. I bargained to get vacation time. Like I bargained all of these things because I knew that I needed those in order to get off state assistance. And I think I had even, if I remember correctly, I had even bargained like a sign-on bonus or something, because I just, you know, like I needed that extra little cash to get me through, because I knew these benefits would be ending. And so I went through and I told her the whole thing, and I said, is there any way? I went through and I said, is there any way that I could just have 4 more weeks of food assistance? Like, my cupboards are almost empty. I'm almost out of, you know, the WIC program is ending. I just need a little help. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do for you, but I'm going to hang up this phone and I'm going to make some phone calls. And I'm actually walking into another meeting for some other clients. And she said, I will do the best that I can. And she said, if I don't call you by the end of today, that means I wasn't able to do anything for you. And this was, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30 in the morning. And I thought, okay, I'm going to wait. And she said, I will call you. And if I do not call you by the end of today, that means I can't do anything for you. And I said, all right. So I hung up the phone, and it was ironically one of those days off where, like, I didn't have any schoolwork. I didn't have class. I didn't have to be to another job. So here I am stewing in my apartment, pacing the floor for what feels like an absorbent amount of time. And at 3:52, I remember this time distinctly. It's amazing. I can remember nothing, but I can remember this. At 3:52 p.m., my phone rang. And as soon as I saw the number, I just started bawling because I knew at some capacity, I didn't know at what capacity, but I knew at some capacity, she had figured something out. So I picked up the phone and I'm already crying. And she said, can you come down to my office and can you be here within the next half an hour? And I said, yes, ma'am. So I jumped in my car and I went down to her office, and she said, I pulled you into my office today because out of my caseload of almost 375 people, you are the only person that has made a plan to get off the system. And she said, and I've been doing this for over 15 years. And she said, I have extended your benefits for another 8 weeks. I have extended your health care for another 4 weeks. And I've also negotiated a cash benefit for you to be able to put on a bill or whatever so that your first paycheck isn't tied up paying for bills. And I put my head on the table and just started bawling. And it still makes me emotional. And I looked at her and I said, you will never see me walk through these doors ever again. Ever. You won't. I promise you, and I promise my child that I will make it my life mission not to see me again. And she looked at me and she said, I believe that. And I look forward to that. So I left there set up for success, but I also left there kind of grieving that, number one, I had to still advocate for myself, which now looking back, it's probably the most beautiful thing. So I made it my mission not to ever go back there. Was it hard? Absolutely. And I will just share with you that my child has made my life really, really easy as a mom. I am so fortunate that even when she was born, even when she was just a baby, she was the happiest. I could just take her anywhere. She slept through the night since the day I brought her home. She was just a joy. And she made it so easy for me to just keep forging forward. And I remember when I graduated with my bachelor's, and it was from Baker, and it was in Flint, and just seeing this little girl who was so happy that her mom had made it. And I remember when she hugged me, she said, "You really did it, Mom." And I just thought, this is the whole entire reason why motherhood is so beautiful. And it really is. So anyhow, that is my welfare story, as I call it. And, one of the most abundant things that I have learned through all of that is the advocacy. Even when I stepped into corporate, being an advocate for myself, being an advocate through the things that I needed and not being afraid to speak up for myself has been the most beautiful thing. And I have tried to teach that to my daughter, that when she is struggling or when she needs help, that all you have to do is ask. All you have to do is ask. And when we went to 8th grade, we had moved back from Saginaw and I had just lost my job. And I knew that this transition into a new public school was not going to be good. And it wasn't. 8th grade was really awful for her. High school has been nothing short of difficult. But one of the things that I want to talk about that is also extremely difficult is what I've learned through, mother of a preteen and a teen. And one of those things is I was working at my corporate job, and I received a phone call from her teacher. And I'm not going to get into specifics because if Daniella wants to get on here and talk about her journey for mental health, then I will let her do that for you all. But receiving the phone call that my daughter was in distress and I didn't know, I had no idea how much she was in distress, was heartbreaking. And all I could think to myself is, I have done this once before in terms of being an advocate for her and providing for the things that she needs with a lot of bumpy roads. And so now is the time for us to work together to get her on track. And we have been in therapy since pretty much the beginning of freshman year. So, gosh, almost 3 years. And she has done a lot of hard work. We've walked through a lot of trauma together, and she has been the best person through all of this and really has advocated for herself. And so watching your child become an advocate for themselves and speak up with what they need and speak up with, hard things that they have walked through really gives me motivation to continue on. And so I just want to share maybe some of the things that I've learned being a mom to this beautiful human. And if any of these resonate with you, or if you are looking for just kind of a warm hug, if you're in a hard transition with your teens, I hope that some of these things that I've learned can be helpful for you too. The first thing I had to do was learn how to reparent myself. I don't talk a lot about my upbringing, but it was very difficult. And it was nothing short of little t and big T trauma. And so one of the things that when I was pregnant with her, and even when she was little, and I have failed multiple times at this, but over the years have gotten pretty good. But learning how to reparent myself meant that I could not scream and yell to get the results that I wanted. I could not bully my child into thinking that my way is the only way and it's the right way. I couldn't do that. She wasn't set up that way. I didn't want to be that way. And ultimately, I didn't want the resentment that I feel sometimes and are continuing to work through in therapy to be the helm of her childhood, because she had enough to walk through. I couldn't parent like my mom parented me, because my daughter was a totally different version of me. She is a totally different version of me. She has probably the best parts of me, and It is very hard to diagnose sometimes what your children need from you. And it's very hard sometimes to parent completely different than what you were brought up with. But I always kept in the back of my mind, all I want is to be better than what I was given. And so that doesn't mean, spoiling. That doesn't mean giving her everything that she's ever asked for, because she does. I mean, she still gets told no on a lot of things. And so it really was interesting to kind of walk through that when she was little. And to be very honest, I feel like I still struggle sometimes with how to be a mom, because the resentment sometimes that I feel is almost the catalyst where I don't want to be too strong, right? But in not being too strong, I don't know what to do, so then I do nothing. And so that is just full transparency, something that I am still continuing to work through. But one of the other things that I learned is no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't protect her from everything. I used to always say, which my therapist has corrected me now, I used to always say, it's my job to protect her. It's my job to protect her. And my therapist said, no, it's not your job to protect her. It's your job to raise a human being that is confident enough, that feels protected. It is your job to raise an adult that feels protected. And how true that is. Another thing I've learned is I'm still learning. Parenting is this weird evolution of babyhood is sometimes, for most of us, for some of us, easy. Basic necessities. Those are pretty easy check boxes. Middle school, they're getting to know themselves, they're playing sports or trying something new. Every once in a while, they'll do something that is just kind of like, wow, that was really dumb. High school is really, really, really hard. Helping mold them into adults that thrive and make good choices is really, really hard. And I think the learning comes from always being reflective of, what did I learn? Or what did I do when I was her age? And so I always have to be working, 40 steps ahead of everyone else. Another thing I learned is, if she's in therapy, so am I. There has been nothing more beautiful than watching our relationship grow because we said yes to therapy. We chose to show up to therapy, and we choose every week to show up to therapy. It is a weekly growth, and I truly believe that I would not have even a fraction of the relationship with my daughter than if I didn't go to therapy. Another thing I learned is unconventional therapy is always the best approach. And what I mean by that is thinking outside of the box, not looking to what your friends are doing with their children or what society even says is right. The whole notion of, well, my dad beat me with a belt and I turned out fine. No, you didn't. No, actually you didn't. Because you have a lot of unresolved trauma that perpetuates into the daily things that you do as a result of that. And I'll just say this out loud. If you feel the need to put your hands on your children while you're parenting, that is not parenting, that is abuse. And so you need to work through that and figure out why you feel the need and what skills you don't have in order to be in a position where you're not putting your hands on someone. The other things I have learned are discipline requires creativity. We had an incident with my daughter, and my husband and I had to think wildly outside of the box. And it was really, really fun to brainstorm that. It wasn't something that was fun in terms of like, oh my gosh, yes, we get to discipline our child because they did this thing. Like, that is not fun. That is something that we don't ever want to do. But it was nice to come up with discipline that fit the crime, right? And the hope is that the discipline that we provided was enough that thing will not continue. We don't want to scare them, but ultimately we want to make sure that our children understand that for everything that you do, whether it's good or bad, there is an equal or greater consequence. And so was that what me and my husband were planning on talking about during our date night? No, but it did. It ended up being that way. And it was something where when we walked away, we were like, yes, this is a really good scenario for this situation. Our children need places where they can vent about everything and not feel judged. I try and fail. I try most times to give my daughter a space where she can just vent about whoever. My husband has a really funny saying of second generation don't give a care. And I feel like sometimes when she comes home from school and wants to give me the tea, it is second generation don't give a care. I don't know who any of these people are. No idea. But she cares and she vents about it. And even if it's the smallest things, right? They're big things to her. And I think that's one other thing to remember is something that is so small to us, because we are years past that, is something so big to them. It is so big to them. It is their whole entire world. And so if we can just give them a little pocket of peace where they can come and download, even though we don't know all of the inner workings, if they can come and let us be the safe space, that is what I really want to feel for her. And our kids have a hard job. It is really, really hard nowadays being a kid. You know, when I went to high school, it was just around the time of Columbine. That's when it started. I was a junior in high school when 9/11 hit. No, I was a sophomore. When 9/11 hit. So our world was just starting to shift. And I remember when I was in high school and we got our first bomb threat. And then we had to practice school shooting things. We didn't have metal detectors. We didn't have people search our book bags. We didn't have a pandemic to walk through. We didn't have an abundance of school shootings. Like I said, Columbine was kind of the first one. Now it's every other week, unfortunately. Our kids have a hard job because they are showing up to school every single day, sitting in a classroom under fluorescent lights, being indoctrinated with information if your kids go to public school, and being shaped and molded into the belief that life exists Monday through Friday. Sometimes you get a summer off, but usually during the summer, if you have a child like mine, they're working. And they have a job, and some kids play sports, and some kids have after school activities and also work. And it is a lot. It is all consuming. And so to ask them to also keep them in mind what is right and what is wrong every single minute of every day, they're human. They're human like everyone else. And they make mistakes. And so I've learned that my job through this whole entire journey of being her mother is, how can I better foster an environment where she can make a mistake, get disciplined, and be disciplined further in her own mind to be a successful adult. The last thing that I've learned is it is required that she do better than even I promised I would do for her. I have always told her that my only requirement for you is that you do better than I did for you. If we are raising children to be exactly like who we are, when do they become their own people? When do they become their own people? I don't want my daughter to be like me, ever. I don't want my daughter to have to walk through the things that I chose to walk through. I want her to do better than that. And so it's my job to make it a requirement and show her how to do better. My daughter turned 17 yesterday. And I have had 17 years of hard lessons. We have had 17 years together of growth, and she has become one of the best 17-year-olds. I never thought that I would be a mom, and I am so, so glad that God chose me to be her mom. And so if there's anything that I can encourage you today is, how can you look back on what you've learned and stir that into something moving forward that is just amazing? How can you reconnect with your child today? My dear, sweet Daniella, you will do amazing things. And I am so thankful for you. Happy birthday, sweet girl.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you heard something that helped you, I would love it if you would leave a review and share it with your friends. This helps more people just like you become inspired to move the needle of their big CEO energy into a positive direction. If you would like to learn more about how I can help you streamline and position your business for growth, or lead your business as a CEO, feel free to jump into the show notes with all of the links to find me. And don't forget to head over to Instagram so we can be pals.